Hi, it's Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast. This one, let's talk about coffee. A little different than my normal podcast. I want to talk about coffee a little bit because I'm on a journey to some better coffee, and I thought I'd share. Now, I've been a coffee drinker all my life. As a young child, I would hang out with the adults on the holidays and that kind of stuff, and of course put plenty of cream and sugar in there. But anyway, it became a thing I liked in the wintertime, sometimes after dinner or a meal or something like that. And then as I became an adult, like everyone else, especially in radio when you're working late hours, I would live on a pot of coffee or two a day. Then I decided that probably wasn't the healthiest thing in the world. Cut way back on coffee and started grinding my own beans with one of those, $10, $15 grinders you get at Walmart and a normal drip coffee maker and started getting better coffee, buying better beans, grinding them every morning. And I did that for a lot of years. Well, then along came the Keurig. And like a lot of people, convenience wins. When I can do it in 2 minutes, what I used to do in 10 to 15, why not? And they got all these flavors. There was a great store in South Florida. It's closed now. The two women who owned it are wonderful. It was one of those places you could walk in with a basket and say 24 pods cost $16.99. Well, you go in with your basket and you could pick any pods you wanted. They would open up the boxes and have these baskets on the wall. Every flavor, light, dark, medium, caffeinated, non-caffeinated, flavored, hot chocolates, you name it. And you can pick whatever you want. So at home, having a carousel of different flavored coffees and I'm pretty much not a flavored coffee guy. Every once in a while, like I really love St. Nickerdoodle, but that's another story. But I do tend to just like plain old coffees, medium and dark roast for the most part. So I've done Keurig for years. I even brought a Keurig with me up to Alaska. And over the last couple of years, I've really been getting into James Hoffmann and some of the other coffee experts on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber myself on a basic variety, put my podcasts up on YouTube and my artist interviews and things like that. But I do want to do more with YouTube. So I've been watching a lot of reviewers and the different things that I'm into, home theater stuff and audio equipment and rock and roll and music and auto-tune and building home studios. And part of that was watching a lot of coffee videos. And I decided and spent a lot of time researching coffee makers, coffee grinders, and the whole 9 yards. So I'll skip over all that, but I did, as a lot of people do these days, a whole lot of research, Google and YouTube, and I watched review after review after review and narrowed down a list, and then what I could find, what I could get locally, what I could get shipped to me, what was on sale. All that worked into an equation where I wound up with what I have today. I bought the OXO 8-cup drip coffee maker. It runs a little over $200. You can find it on sale for right around $200, give or take. I also got a Zwilling F-Energy coffee grinder, which is a pretty substantial coffee grinder that sells for over $100. My local kitchen store that I really love had it on sale about $50 off, so I bought it there instead of importing it. So I had seen a lot of reviews on both of these items. I picked the coffee maker specifically because it checked a whole lot of boxes. The grinder, on the other hand, well, I had 3 or 4 that I was looking for, and whatever I found at the best price, conveniently, where I could also get parts. We'll talk about the burr grinding and all that kind of stuff. I finally settled on this because I could get everything here in town, and it was cheaper than ordering it and waiting, days for it to arrive here in Alaska. So I immediately started buying Alaska roasted coffees. Sure, not a lot of them are, I don't think any of them are grown in Alaska, but some of them are sourced from specific places, and you can trace all that. Believe me, if you haven't watched James Hoffmann on YouTube and you're a weird coffee person as he describes himself, go watch a lot of his videos. You will learn more about coffee than you've ever known. Look, Starbucks is fine, but when you move to Alaska, coffee's a culture, and we have these little kiosks all over. We have like 2 or 3 Starbucks, but we have hundreds of these little coffee kiosks. Each one is their own little company, own little business. Each one very proud of the coffee they serve and the drinks they make, and they're everywhere. They are in these large parking lots of the big stores and stuff. The end of that parking lot by the street never gets used. So they have these kiosks that have a drive-through window on each side. You can get any kind of coffee, beverage, whatever, usually cheaper than Starbucks and usually better, fresher. The beans came from somewhere here in Alaska most of the time. So I've been trying a few, and I will do some other podcast reviews of some of the coffees I try. North Pole Coffee Roasters. I've just discovered AK Roast, made in Anchorage, really good and cost-effective. Of course, Kaladi Brothers and a few others are regulars here. Got some other Winter Wolf or Wicked Wolf. Anyway, we'll get into some specifics about coffee. I started trying some medium roast because I got tired of all the dark roast. There is this misnomer that people think a dark roast has more caffeine in it. It doesn't. Matter of fact, a light roast can have more caffeine than a dark roast. It just depends. Again, I highly recommend James Hoffman. And no, he's not sponsoring this or paid me anything, but I learned a lot from watching his channel. And several other Seattle Coffee People or whatever their coffee road, whatever that one's called, that's a good channel as well. But James Hoffman, top of the line, if you want to, it's like watching the hi-fi channels where they review the speakers that are $10,000. You're never going to buy them, but it's interesting to watch anyway. Well, he reviews like the $1,000 coffee makers, and I'm not going to buy one of those either. But I learned about how coffee's grown, how it's processed, how it's made, what you get out of it, the right ratios of water to coffee beans, and all that kind of stuff. I was schooled by James Hoffman and several other people on YouTube. So anyway, I have been using these for over a month now. Why I bought an OXO 8-cup drip. Well, I don't want to do espresso. I'm not a big espresso guy, and I wasn't going to go into hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get a nice espresso machine. It would be wasted on me. So a nice drip coffee maker, this one is certified by the Specialty Coffee Association, the SCA, because it checks all the boxes that it can make. If you follow the directions, it can make an incredible cup of coffee to the specifications of what a good cup of coffee is. It brews the water at the right temperature. It takes as long to go through the system and the coffee as it should to get the right extraction out of it. It just has all sorts of little tiny features. It's solidly built. I have never spent over $200 for a coffee maker. That's usually that $30 to $40 thing that you're going to wear out in a couple of years and buy a new one. That same thing that we had at radio stations when I was coming up. But again, doing the research and buying something that you can replace the parts on that'll last a long time, that has a long warranty, and is quality made. So the Specialty Coffee Association says a cup of coffee is 5 ounces. And everything and the measuring and everything with that is based on that. So I had to gauge how much coffee do I really drink. And I'm usually between 24 and 30 ounces a day, which is a lot. I usually maybe do 2 6, 7 ounce cups in the morning, and then I fill up a mug, a thermal mug that I carry with me throughout up until like lunchtime or whatever. And then that's all the coffee I drink in the day. And that was usually about 3 Keurig pods, right? And Keurig goes for about 50 cents to $1 per pod, depending on where you buy them, maybe a little less. So now I'm making coffee, grinding the beans myself. It only takes a couple of minutes, and then I do the right amount of water, the ratio. I'm using 48 grams of beans to 30 ounces of water. And it's coming out with a near perfect cup of coffee, as good as anything I've had in one of those expensive restaurants where they bring in the coffee after the meal and it costs as much as the meal. Yeah, it's really good coffee, and it does depend on the beans. But like I said, I'm buying a lot of locally roasted beans, so everything is very fresh. The dates on the back of these packages are over a year out, so they just came out of the manufacturing and all that. A lot of them come from Anchorage and other parts of the state. A lot of the stores stock a lot of local coffees, and like I said, coffee is very much a culture here. So for the grinder, it's a little loud, but other than that, it's the nicest grinder I've ever owned. It has multiple settings around this ring. It's got a large plastic hopper at the top. You could probably put a whole bag of beans in there. I've never done that. I've never really done more than 48 grams of beans, which is about a quarter, maybe a third of the container. Below that, there is a ring. And this ring has multiple settings all the way around, from espresso to French press and everything in between. And in the middle is the section for drip coffee, and I've been experimenting with the drip settings. It's minute details. When you adjust something like this on a burr grinder, it's basically setting those burrs closer or farther apart to make your grind bigger or smaller. You want a more chunky grind for, say, a French press, and you want a more fine grind for an espresso. So anyway, I'm in the middle. I'm playing with those. I could use this grinder for other things if I were ever to expand my collection. That was another reason to get this particular grinder. If I wanted to get a French press or I want to get an espresso machine, I can still use this grinder for those. It's not just for drip coffee. Now, the OXO, you can do anywhere between 1 cup, 2 to 4, or 5 to 8. It's got settings on it on the basket and on where you right next to the power button. There's a 2 to 4 or a 5 to 8, telling the system how much water you're putting in and how long it needs to cook that water. It's got this nice tube. The water goes into a container on the right side of the machine or the left side of the machine, which has a tube in the middle of it. The water goes into below where you can see into a stainless steel container where it's being heated, and then steam and pressure force the water up the tube and through the tube mechanism into the basket, where it steeps just long enough and drips into a thermal carafe. Another reason why this is an expensive coffee maker and why you want to think about this is the thermal carafe. It comes with a really nice one. I have tested this on the weekends. I have left coffee in there for over 2 hours. Steam was still coming off of it 2 hours later when I poured it into my cup. Thermal carafes are pretty expensive, but that's included in the price of the thing. You don't want a hot plate on a coffee maker. And believe me, every coffee maker I've ever owned in my life had a hot plate. That burns the coffee. Better to get a carafe that will keep it close to the temperature. The reviews would put temperature probes in the basket and in the carafe while they were making coffee to see how much temperature loss there was. Only a degree or two. So the coffee is staying at an optimal temperature all the way through the system and into that thermal carafe where it keeps it for an hour or two. Now, for a lot of people, 8 cups is only 40 ounces of coffee. That may be not enough coffee for your household. If multiple people are drinking cups of coffee, I could see probably more than 2 people would need a larger. And OXO does make, or OXO, I don't know how to pronounce it, OXO will say, does make larger coffee makers. But for me, living alone with 2 dogs who don't drink coffee unless I drop a bean on the floor, thankfully that hasn't happened, I make what they say is 6 cups a day, give or take, between 5 and 6 usually. And that's between 24 and 36 ounces or 25 and 30 ounces. That's plenty enough coffee for me, and it's good flavor. It's smooth. You really should give this a try. Up your coffee game a little bit. Why did I do this podcast? Because, I've been thinking about it for a while as I've been using these items, and I kind of tell you guys everything. I talk about the movies I see, and I talk about Alaska and the job sometimes, and you get the interviews and everything. So I really like coffee, and I found a way to make coffee. One of the things I've always done is find the right way to make something and then continue to make it that way. I'm not saying like recipes because I'll more cheese or more salt or whatever. But like I wanted to switch from sodas to iced tea. So I did a lot of research about iced tea and asked all my friends in the South how they make iced tea. And I found the way that I can make iced tea. I use a Mr. Coffee iced tea maker that brews the water at the same temperature every time. And I use the same amount of sugar and the same amount of tea. And I have a couple tricks. Something I can replicate every time, like a scientist. If I can replicate this every time, if I can make this tea and I like this tea, I want to make sure I can make it the same way every time. Well, that came to the same thing with coffee, because you have that with a Keurig. You buy a big pack of 24 pods, every one of those pods is going to taste exactly the same because the Keurig has done that. But I tell you, after drinking real drip coffee that I've grinded myself, as opposed to what's predominantly instant coffee in a Keurig, I went back the other day because I was in a hurry, so I made a Keurig real quick and started drinking it. It tasted like water, or watered down coffee, I guess. And I've always enjoyed my Keurig. I always thought the sacrifice on real flavor was for the convenience. But now I've unplugged the machine. I don't even let it boot up in the morning because I haven't used it since I got this. The OXO 8-cup drip coffee maker and the Zwilling F-Energy coffee grinder. Highly recommended both of them. They work great. They had great reviews all around. They were the number 1 or number 2 pick at almost every review I watched. In some cases, they were the number 2, but the number 1 was maybe more expensive or not available or whatever. So going over the vast amount of reviews I watched and articles I read and all that, these were 2 of the best buys you can make if you want to try making better coffee. Then make sure you buy some good locally sourced beans or locally roasted beans and have a much better coffee experience. Got to tell you, grinding my own beans, having the house smell like that in the morning, and then making that drip coffee, it takes about 5-6 minutes to make. It's a much more wonderful experience. The coffee maker is almost silent. The grinder is pretty loud. So we were going to talk about grinding. The old cheapy grinders you buy at Walmart and such are blade grinders, and they're awful. They basically just smash the beans. They're not very sharp, and they just smash it, and you get a very jumbled up version of what coffee can be. Sure, if you leave it in there a long time and shake it up and down and all that. Burr grinders, there's conical and there's flat. Flat is the most expensive and the best. Mine is a conical burr grinder. It's a step above the knife grinders, if you will, but it's a step down from a flat burr grinder. Best thing about burr grinders is you can usually replace the burrs. If you want a bigger size, you want to change some of the internals, you can do that. It's not cheap to do that, but again, this is a machine that I can take apart, clean. That was the other thing about this Zwilling grinder, really easy to clean. Take a couple things off and you have access to all the things. It comes with a little brush. Another good thing about this grinder is I have not had a whole lot of static electricity cling. With some grinders, they churn out static electricity and that coffee sticks to the burrs. It sticks to the container that you're going into. I got to say, my coffee slides right out of this container. Blown away. But again, I spent a fair amount of money on both of these items. They should work this well. But now that I've used them for over a month, it literally takes me 5-6 minutes to do all this. And then I go, get ready and I come back and the coffee's ready and I pour myself a cup and I make my big mug, my takeaway mug. And sometimes I have that second cup. Sometimes I don't, but I really enjoyed it. So I thought I'd share with you. Zwilling, OXO, there's a few other names. Go check out James Hoffman and all his reviews. He is a quirky coffee guy and probably the biggest expert. Most people say he's the king, and I would agree with that. So anyway, if you're into coffee, subscribe, please. Check out links if you want to support the channel because I plan to do some more coffee reviews. We'll talk about some coffee beans and what I've tried and what I like and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for listening to me babble about coffee and this new coffee experience I'm enjoying. I'm an old guy that used to grind the old way, and now I'm grinding the new way and having wonderful coffee. Hope you're having a spectacular day. Thanks for listening.